You are on the cutting edge with Dr. Lee Pearson, Dr. Robert Stubblefield, and Steve Richens. Brought to you by the Ayn Rand Center UK. Get your super chats ready because we have a super hot, fruitful, fun-filled show titled Recapping Some Cutting Edge Key Concepts and Controversies. So our past shows, Lee has picked some insightful morsels that we're going to feast on today. And Bob and I will take pot shots from the sideline. Not really. We'll bring insights as well, hopefully. So with that, turn it over to Lee.
Okay, well, now that's going to be more than just Steve, more than just taking pot shots, because some of these issues are basically either yours or Bob's. So the ball will be more in your court. But I'm going to start with some in the areas that, at least for me, are my favorite things. And so we've done quite a few of our shows have been on these things. The area that Dr. Peikoff calls the anteroom of philosophy, which is to say, is that what he calls it, Tom? The anteroom of philosophy, perception and volition. I'm interested in those things. I studied perception in graduate school, and I've been interested in volition all ever since at least since I was a freshman in college, if not earlier. And the issues of introspection come under this category too, which I actually did a PhD on. So I'm going to start with some of those things, and they actually interrelate. And I just listed some of the things that we talked about. Some of them come from more than one episode together. And so I'm not doing this in any particular order, other than I'm going to start with some of these things I think are fundamental. So the first thing, one that occurred to me, was we had some discussion in more than one session on the conception of perception as inerrant versus the conception of perception as valid, inerrant versus valid. Now, Ayn Rand talks about validity. Somewhere in recent times, people have started talking more and more about perception as inerrant. And I don't want to go over the whole thing, the whole issue. That's not the point. I want to just bring up some of these things, and we can talk a little bit more about them, but we've got a lot of issues, and people can raise questions, of course, both in the chat and in the clubhouse that we will have following. But to boil down my view of this, inerrant, the concept of inerrancy is a negative concept. It tells you what perception doesn't do. Inerrancy says that perception doesn't make errors, that you don't have perceptual errors. Validity is a positive concept. It tells you what perception does do, not what it doesn't do. Perception gives you knowledge of the world. And I think positive concepts are generally better. There are room for negative concepts, but you should make your concepts positive if you can. And in this case, it is essential. It is not enough to simply say that perception doesn't make mistakes. You cannot make mistakes by sitting in your chair, closing your eyes, and doing nothing, and you will be inerrant. But so what? It doesn't give you anything. Perception only gives you something, can only be the basis of human knowledge if it is valid. So I strongly support validity, which is the term, by the way, Ayn Rand used, as the correct description of perception. And I'm going to leave it at that. Well, I can write, let's see. I'm going to leave it at that. I think I will leave it at that. Either you guys want to jump in with something on this?
So the reason objectivism a couple objectivist intellectuals use this is to
inerrancy, you mean?
Inerrancy, to explain perception in a way that is not direct. Well, I mean, they would claim it's direct, but it's
well, you're asking about the motivation. Is that what you're asking? Why the switch to determine?
Yeah, why?
Well, I don't want to psychologize about this particularly. I'm not totally sure. I think I'll just say I think that some people may see it as more defensible. That if you try, but I don't think that's anyway. That may not be a correct description of their view. To me, it doesn't matter, regardless of what motive people have for referring to perception as inerrant. I think the correct way to describe it is as valid, not as inerrant. Bob wants to say something.
Well, I think the use of a negative definition is as an answer to people who doubt that. It's not, I think you're correct that the best way to think of it is validity. If you start thinking of inerrancy, you're really not addressing what is, you're addressing arguments about what is.
Yeah, okay.
And the reason we're addressing, or they are trying to, and I'm not psychologizing, I'm only trying to find the philosophical, why in the past has this been used for religions? It's been the apologist, and there are some philosophers who use it. So in that vein of the thought, it seems that there's a trying to justify a representationalism. That's what it seems to me.
Now we're not talking about objectivists anymore, who are not representationalists.
No,
at least not explicitly. Right. Now, whether there are some implications, but yeah, right. In the culture, you're talking about the wider culture. Yeah, if you go to Google and put in inerrant, the first thing you'll get is several religious websites talking about biblical inerrancy. So that's the main. But there are some philosophers. Now, I don't really know much about that, but there are some non-objectivist philosophers that talk about inerrancy. And I haven't actually identified them, so I'm not sure what to say. Other than, so I'm just going to speculate and then move on. I suspect that those people are representationalists, or at least they don't advocate or know how to advocate direct realism. So there may be some philosophers out there that are not familiar with James J. Gibson, which everybody in perception should know about Gibson, whether you agree with them or not. Everybody should read The Senses Considered as Perceptual Systems. And then you have the argument for direct realism, and that argument that perception gives you direct contact, which means knowledge about, really, the world. You learn about the world. So validity is the right term. All right, I think I'm going to go on. You can always come back if you want to any of these things, but we have a lot of possibilities. We're probably going to take, as Steve mentioned to me earlier, we probably will take more than one episode to go through even a recap. But anyway, let's move on. I wanted to talk about what I like to call proto-volition, which is is a controversial issue of volitional, the role of volitional action, volitional tension in perception, because the standard objectivist view that you can get in all kinds of places is that volition basically is a conceptual phenomenon. In some places, it's even defined as going to the conceptual level. I wouldn't define it that way, but it has been. So it's controversial for anybody to say that perception, the act of perception, involves volition. But I think it does, and I'll give some quick examples. And I think that's about all I can do as a recap, but I think the examples are telling. One would be just a simple example of perceiving a tree. Let's say you're sitting in your house and there's a tree. You look out the window, there's a tree. Now, it's true, if you open your eyes, you'll see something. Not all perception is subject to volition. I mean, let me put it the other way. A lot of perception is purely automatic, a lot of it. But I think it's wrong to say that perception in general is an automatic process. I don't think you can go from some to all there. But yeah, when you sit and open your eyes and you see a tree, you'll learn something about the tree. But if you really want to learn about the tree, what are you going to do? You're going to get up on your feet, walk out the door, walk around the tree, get all kinds of changing perspectives on the tree, maybe feel the tree, maybe listen to the leaves falling. You'll perform a whole lot of volitional movements and actions, movements and acts of attention to obtain more knowledge about what a tree is. Now, I could go into this in more detail by discussing Gibson's theory of active theory of perception, but I'm not. We can't do that. We did that, and that I may mention it again a little bit later, but I'm not going to do that now. But anyway, you don't need that to know that you can learn a lot about a tree by walking around it and looking at it and coming and inspecting it and doing a lot of intentional volitional acts. So that's one kind of simple example. Another one I think is very telling is what's called in cognitive psychology for the last 50 years, the cocktail party phenomenon. Now, actually, there are two cocktail party phenomena in cognitive psychology, and they're opposite examples. One of them is that if you're in a cocktail party with 100 people and there's a cacophony of sound and people are talking all at once, if somebody says your name, you're very likely to hear it. So there are things that can intrude on your attention quite automatically, like the saying of your name. The other cocktail party phenomenon is the one that we're more concerned with here, and that is that if you're in that room with 100 people talking, and there's a cacophony of sound, it is nonetheless possible for you if you choose to. You have to choose to. If you exert the effort to do it, you have to exert the effort. You can pay attention to a single line of conversation, to one person, what one person is saying in that big din of noise. You can pay attention to that, but it takes effort to do so, and you have to choose to do it. In other words, it's volitional. It's not automatic. It does not happen automatically, that process. That's a good one to focus on if you want to distinguish the automatic from the volitional in perception. Another one is in a different sense modality. What have we got so far? We have vision and we have audition. If you have a pen, let's see, that doesn't look like a pen. That's a pen. Say, nice Tombow Zoom pen. And anyway, if you take a pen and just drop it on your hand, you're not going to perceive much about it. You're going to sort of get a sense of the weight. Even there, you get a better sense if you kind of heft your hand up and down with it. You get a better sense of the weight. You get maybe a little sense of its shape and things. But if you really want to perceive the pen, you do something like this. I mean, haptically. Haptic is a word for active touch. So you roll the pen around, or you roll it on the top, or you go like this. There are many ways of doing it, but it involves the actions of your fingers and your hands, intentional action that you do intentionally to pick up more information. And it does take some effort to do it right. It's not tremendously effortful. I'm not feeling a lot of effort, but it does, if you stop trying to do it, you'll stop doing it. So there is definitely a volitional
Well, you've
element.
done it. You have given this example over the years, and so a lot of it is automated. But if a child were to hold up the pen for the first time, feel the weight, and then roll it around in his hand, there is a lot more information, obviously.
Absolutely. And even you say it's automated, but if it's a pen you haven't felt before, you'll learn something new about the pen by rolling it around. And it doesn't have to be a pen. It could be any object, any new object you can learn something about. Okay, here's another one. I got one more. Bob wants to talk about this one.
No, go ahead first. Get the other
example. So I got one more quick one. This is a quick one. The Andromeda Galaxy. How do you like that? The Andromeda Galaxy is, I believe, the furthest object that you can see with your naked eye. Because if I remember correctly, and these numbers change, over the years, but I think it's 2 million light years away. So the light takes 2 million years to get here from Andromeda at 300,000 kilometers per second. You can work that out. That's a long way. It's very far away. But it's a little dim patch of light. Now, the reason I bring it up is if you try to look at the Andromeda Galaxy by foveating it, by looking directly at it, the fovea, the center of your retina, where the fovea has the cone cells, which are more sensitive, which are color detectors, and they're packed more closely together, so they detect more detail, but they are not as sensitive to light as the rod cells, which are richer in the periphery of your retina. They're more rod cells. So if you foveate something that's very dim, you're likely not to see it. So what do you do if you want to see the Andromeda galaxy, which is in the Andromeda constellation? If you want to see it, what you do is, well, you can look at it, but you have to kind of look at it out of the corner of your eye. So that could be either by moving, but I guess you can look. Let's see, can you look straight at it? And no, I don't think so. You have to look straight at something else. Okay, so you look straight, a little bit offset, and then you pay attention volitionally to what's in the corner of your eye. That's what you have to pay attention to, not what you normally pay attention mostly and automatically pretty much to what's in the fovea or what you're directly looking at. But in this case, you have to actually look at it with volitional effort to see it. So those are some examples that show the role of volitional attention, at least. There's more involved in volition because, well, I did mention the action of walking around. There's volitional movement, other kinds of movement, but there's also internal volitional attention, even in perception. Okay, Bob, you wanted to comment on this?
Yes. We're talking about potentially two different types of choices. Volitional means you actively focus your mind or you don't. And there's this other choice, which is like your example of you hear your name in the cocktail party and you automatically focus in that direction. So there are two different types of choice. One is volitional, one is automatic. Now, I think that what you want to identify as proto-volitional is something that is automatic.
No. Remember in the cocktail party case, let's take that case.
Yes.
The automatic perceptual example was your name being said.
Right.
Okay? Then your attention goes automatically. That is to be contrasted. There's a contrast between that and when you're paying attention to a conversation, which you must do by choice and by mental effort. It takes mental effort. You got to pay attention. Try it.
Yes.
I recommend people trying it. That is volition.
Yes.
Or I call it proto-volition.
No,
that's proto-volition. It isn't conceptual. It's not conceptual. It's just the direction of the perceptual apparatus. That's what it is. Now you could,
you had to choose to do that.
Yes, absolutely.
And you did not have to choose to hear your name.
That's right. Exactly.
And
that's exactly.
If we go to the creatures that you don't like me to keep talking about, the animals.
Oh boy, the animals.
All right. Now, why did the tiger get alert and do so and so? And I think that's the same type of automatic choice. It happens to have been programmed in by DNA, genetic structure, whatever.
Okay, well, this is why we're not going to finish all these topics today, which we don't have to. This is fine.
I agree we don't. I just wanted to register.
But I specifically started here with human introspection because that's the place to start. If you want to understand any sort of volition, you should not start with the animals. The animals are kind of the last. I mean, I like animals, especially if they're prepared.
But notice,
that's not right. I like some dogs better than like some people. I'm all in favor of studying animals, but you can't introspect on the animals. So we start with human introspection first. And if you can see that in that cocktail party, that the name, your perception of the name is an automatic process, but the perception of a conversation that you need to attend to by exerting mental effort, which is the signature of volition, the conscious indicator of volitional effort. Of volition is consciously felt mental effort. If you see the difference between those things, that's the difference. The first thing is just automatic perception, and the second thing is what I'm calling volition or proto-volition, because I don't want to say it's the same. It's certainly not the same as full-blown conceptual volition, but it is volitional. It's a volitional choice. So that, yeah.
For some other time when we want to go in depth on this, I would like you to tell me what the difference is between full-blown conceptual volition and the volition that you use when you choose to pick out a conversation.
Okay. Yeah, actually, that's going to come up today because I was about to go off to talk about a little bit about what we've discussed before about free will in humans. I can say something about that right now. The conceptual free will involves a volitional attention to internal entities, mental entities and mental processes, and so it intimately involves introspective self-awareness, the kind of introspective self-awareness that animals don't. By the way, our friends the animals don't have. So they don't have this kind of volition, the volition that is directed by introspective awareness, and whose objects are internal phenomena of consciousness rather than external objects. So that's the difference in a nutshell. And you're right, we could explore this further, but that's it in a nutshell. Is it the conceptual volition in its fullest sense, the fullest sense that humans have it, I think necessarily involves introspective self-awareness. And there, if you're just purely working at the perceptual level, as people like to say, the animals that work only at that level don't have that. And that's the difference. I think Ayn Rand said that's the difference between the big difference between animals and humans. I think we can find that somewhere, but I'm going to go ahead. Okay. So that naturally leads to, what about human free will? And I just wanted to highlight one issue here that we did discuss on some of our, more than one of the episodes. And that is free will, does it occur in two stages or one stage? Now, why is this an issue? Well, does it occur in two stages or one stage with two aspects? So why am I talking about this? And is this an important issue? Well, I'm talking about it because in the objectivist literature in more than one place, and I don't want to start singling out authors because I don't want to engage in polemics here. That's not my purpose. But you can find discussions in more than one place that say something more or less along the following lines. An analogy is made between vision and visual focus and conceptual focus. And the analogy goes, in vision, this is the way it is said to go. In vision, first you focus your eyes, and then you direct that attention that you focused to a particular object. You can then look at a lamp or a table or something. And similarly, the idea is first you focus your mind in some, shall we say, generic sense, and then you direct your focus to some particular object in your mind there, some concept, some thought, some idea, some contention, something like that. Now, I like the analogizing to a vision. I think that works. However, the actual analogy is not quite correct because there is no such thing as first focusing your eyes and then directing it to something in particular. Visual focus has to be on a particular object at a particular distance, and you have to have your convergence also. Your eyes have to converge and focus at a certain distance on a certain thing. There is no generic focus. That's just not the way optics works. Everything else is out of focus. You get double images also because of the convergence issue. And so what you have to focus on something in particular. Now, I think that's true in vision, and I don't think anybody can contest that. What I would say is that is also true, that the analogy does hold. That is also true in conceptual focus. When you focus your mind, as some would say, is that the way the phrase goes, you focus it on something in particular. Consciousness always has an object There is no generic focus. I don't believe there's a generic focus switch that you can flick and everything suddenly comes into focus, or even not suddenly comes into focus. It doesn't work that way. And I also don't think it's two separate acts either. I don't think first it's not two separate acts in vision. It's not that you first focus your eyes and then focus on something. You focus your eyes on something. That's one complete act. That's all of a piece. And I think it's the same way in conceptual focus. You don't first focus and then focus on some particular issue. Rather, you focus your thinking on a particular issue. And you do it by directing your attention. The ability of free will, the basic choice. Well, let me separate out the two aspects. It's one act, but there are separable aspects, and this is important. There is the part of the free will act that is the exertion of just the pure exertion of mental effort, which you can feel and you can do it, and there's no skill involved. There are no causal antecedents to it. Nothing forces you to do it. Nothing stops you from doing it. You choose to do it. You choose to exert mental effort. That's a pure free will act. But along with it, not later, but along with it, as you do that, you are directing it to something in particular. Your attention, your thinking, your attention and thinking, I guess, are directed to a particular object. What the particular object is, that is subject to antecedent causation. And for that exact reason, since it's subject to antecedent causation, it is also subject to training. So I believe you can train people in the skill of will, the skill of exerting will. But it's the second part of it, not the first, not the exertion of just the sheer exertion of effort. That's a free choice. Everybody knows how to do it. You can't be trained to do it. You don't need to be any training to do it. It's just like, sort of like, do you need training to lift your hand? No, you just do it. Do you need training to exert mental effort? No, you just do it. But where that effort is going to be directed, on what particular object will it be directed? That is subject to all kinds of antecedent causes, like your values, for example, and your context of knowledge, and also your skill in selecting what to focus on, which is mediated by introspection. So that's going to come up be important. So I think that's the right way of describing free will choice. It has these two parts. And my favorite Ayn Rand quote from material that she never published herself. I didn't publish it in her life. Well, she never published it herself. My favorite quote comes from the Journals of Ayn Rand, and I'll just give you the short part of it. I've quoted this before, of course. She says, "An out of focus state may be a state of rushing past everything psychoepistemologically, parenthesis, while focus requires slowness." Focus requires slowness. And then she puts in parenthesis a little question mark, because she wasn't quite, this is the Journals. She's writing her notes about stuff. I would like to erase that question mark and just say, that is correct. Focus requires slowness. And that's exactly what free will does in the conception I just described. When you exert mental effort, what you do, and this is, well, anyway, what you do is you hold on to something and keep something in mind that otherwise would have escaped, gone away. And you basically you activate more knowledge about it. And that's the essential power of free will, is to go beyond the automatic by activating knowledge. And otherwise, if you don't do that, if you don't exert your free will, you will very frequently let key concepts slip by too quickly before you have extracted the knowledge you need from them to keep your thought process moving towards this goal. The key concepts go by too quickly, and you get bogged down, you get stuck, you get overloaded, you get wandering. There's all kinds of problems. You arrive at wrong conclusions. All of that is avoided if you can direct your attention to the key concepts more specifically than it happens automatically. Okay, so again, just the first part of that action is pure free will, the exertion of effort. The second aspect is subject to antecedent causation and is less trainable. And it's a skill I like to refer to nowadays as refocusing. The idea refocusing is getting more out of your thinking, which you can always do. Get more out of your thinking by directing your attention, you're volitionally directing your attention more specifically to key concepts in the situation you're considering, whatever that situation is. The key concepts are the ones that are important, but are otherwise would slip by too quickly. Bob wants to jump in here.
Well, it sounds as if you're saying the first stage of focus is you're arguing against somebody who says the first stage is just to exert effort and focus, and the second stage is to focus on something. But supposing I say that the first stage is to focus on whatever automatically comes up from your subconscious, whatever it is that drives you to attention. And the second stage is redirecting or refocusing on whatever the key concept is.
I wouldn't disagree with that, except that for this one little thing. Everything that you could possibly focus on is material that has been that your subconscious, that's to say neural processes, have provided for you. So so you can, something is provided for you, and you can choose to, when you exert mental effort, you can choose to hold on to that thing longer, whatever that thing that is automatically in your focus. And you can do that, and that's free will, and that's the right thing to do sometimes. Or you can grab onto something that's in the fringe, the periphery of your consciousness, and go that direction. Either of those things. All of that material comes up from is provided you cannot pay attention to anything that's totally outside your consciousness.
Right. And
so you got to.
I think
so I guess I'm agreeing with you is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And I think that goes very well with the analogy of vision.
You bet it does. Absolutely. Because there's a focus.
What you first focus on may not be what you really should be focusing on.
Right.
It's there, and it has to be there. And now you can redirect, but you have to redirect it to something that's within your field of vision.
Yeah, that's right. That's correct. So I think Steve, we're all in agreement on this, right?
So, well, focus is used in so many different ways. I don't like the word anymore. I like your exerting mental effort. The experience of volition is exerting mental effort. And then you direct it at something, but you do it simultaneously. And that seems intuitive to me. It goes to my own.
But the issue here is when you go into focus or when you start exerting mental effort, what are you exerting the mental effort on?
Something. Always something.
Yeah, something. And where does that something come from?
Yeah,
that's what we talked about before.
Yeah. Well, the question, I guess that's a question I haven't thought about is, can you as soon as you exert effort, can you direct it towards something in the periphery? Or do you have to first direct it to what's in the focus? Offhand, I would say you could do either one. But I'm going to have to go back into the laboratory, so to speak, and do a lot of introspecting on this. By the way, I'm a professional introspector, Bob. Did you know that? I'm a professional.
Oh, yes.
Because I was a professional inspector because I was paid to do introspection. I sat around and wrote out all kinds of methods for doing things like reading difficult material, solving math problems, and particularly doing well on the SAT or GMAT or LSAT. And I had a whole lot of methods for each type of question. And the way you discover those methods, well, at least what I did, is I tried them. I came up with something. I wrote out roughly what I did by introspecting, by identifying them, and then tweak that. Go back and tweak it and try try to make it better. And I don't know if anybody has got another method, but that's what I did. So I'm a professional. So there. Well, I was anyway. I'm not actually teaching how people do the SAT. Yeah. Well, no, I did some LSAT stuff. So I'm still a professional introspector, sure. Anyway, I need to do some more to figure out whether what's the story with the your initial act of mental effort. Now, is that what you want to call that focusing? I don't know. Focus to me exists in as more a result. I know that the definition that, for example, Dr. Peacock gives refers to commitment, and I understand that it's a reasonable idea. However, I think I like the idea that out of focus is rushing past, and focus requires slowness. Focus is a state. So from that standpoint, focus is a state of optimal slowness, where you're going through things in the appropriate speed, where you activate the knowledge that you need, as opposed to rushing past them. And very often slower is faster because of that phenomenon. So I'm more apt to think of focus as kind of the result rather than the act. But this is a very uncharted territory, let us say. But anyway, what I think is important for us, that other things I'm going to get to if time permits. Refocusing is the skill of will, and there is a skill involved. It was hard for me to get my head around this notion of it being a skill, because of the idea that free will is just something the philosophical point that free will is just something you exert, and it can't depend on antecedent causal factors, which would include any training would be antecedent. So the idea of separating it into these two parts that come together, they're not one after the other, but come together, actually is quite important for me in seeing that refocusing as a trainable skill is the skill of will, the skill of free will, getting more out of your thinking by directing it more specifically to key concepts that would otherwise slip by. Okay. Anyway, unless you want to jump in more, I mean, there's obviously lots more to say about that, which we will do at other times. But if you got something you want to now, Bob looks like he's ready.
One thought is that before you're in focus, everything is on the fringe.
Let's see. Before you're in focus, everything is on the fringe. I'm not sure. Something about that sounds right. But consider the possibility of somebody. One thing that you have to think about in these cases is the negative case, evasion. And somebody could focus very focally on, I don't want to think about this. Actually, what people usually do is, you don't say, I don't want to think about elephant, because a herd of elephants, that's the common example. A herd of elephants comes trampling through your mind. But what you do is you make sure that you're paying attention focally to something else that's not what you want to really pay attention to. And that's an out of focus state. So I'm not sure that's exactly the way it works, but it's just something to that. Again, something we need to follow up on by some heavy introspective work that we're not going to do today.
So this is also the point that evasion requires mental effort.
Yes, evasion is mental. So mental effort is not equivalent to focus, because you need mental effort to keep out of focus. Whatever you mean by that, you've got to exert mental effort to be evasive. Evasion is not the same as drift. This is a well-known point, of course. Yeah. Okay. There's obviously we could spend the rest of this session and many more, and we probably will. We'll get back to this one. We'll find a way of getting back to this one, because Bob has raised some issues that I have to think about and introspect on. But I want to, since I haven't done all that stuff yet, I want to go on just to bring up some other topics, a few other things as we have time, and so they're related things. Actually, we had some sessions on education. Let me see, where did I put that here? We had some sessions on education, one with Ed Thompson, who's the leading activist in the field. And then we had a couple on teaching, psychoepistemology as child's play, psychoepistemology for children. And in those sessions, which we did with Harry Binswanger and Jeffrey Frankel, who actually has a child, which is a valuable, if you want to talk about educating children, it's good to have a legitimate source of empirical evidence instead of just sitting there, just talking. So anyway, Jeff has a very bright child that he's doing homeschooling. So it was useful to have that. We had a 2-part discussion, and I was mainly advocating that you can teach free will to children at some age. I'm not sure exactly what age you can start, but certainly no later than 8. There was a research study many years ago with 8-year-olds that found, I'm not going to go into the details, that 8-year-olds have about as many concepts about memory as cognitive psychologists do. They just don't have the technical terminology. Things like, that you remember things that more recent, that you've learned more recently, that rehearsal helps, that putting things into categories helps, stuff like that, which there are many experiments in cognitive psychology where the kids know this stuff. So they know something about their own minds, and therefore that knowledge didn't just come out of outer space. I think that indicates their introspective abilities. So it's probably earlier. You could probably go back to 6 or 5 or something and teach some introspective skill. And the point is, I think that skill, or more generally, introspective skill on thinking, what I call thought process introspection. That, or maybe more generally, the skill of refocusing, which is partly, a large part of that is introspection. The skill of refocusing is the most important cognitive skill not taught explicitly in school at any level, and should be taught, and it underlies other skills. You can immediately improve the skill of comprehension. And we talked, of course, with Ed Thompson about the importance of in reading comprehension of phonics as against the whole word method. And that's very important, it's true, but it's really only the beginning. Once you get phonics in your school system, then the next thing is you need to train comprehension. There are comprehension skills that are not just in reading, but in listening to lectures or looking at graphs. They can be in other areas besides reading. There are comprehension skills, and they depend greatly, in my opinion, on refocusing, on finding the key concepts and activating the knowledge about the key concepts in order to achieve greater comprehension. You can always comprehend more, because there really is no such thing as full comprehension, in my opinion, of some written material. Because no matter how much you know, there are always other connections you can make, and knowledge is connections with other stuff. So, that's what I think I'd like to see get into education. And, we're doing some work, and Steve and I are going to try to work on this more, right, Steve? So if we can get refocusing in the right places, which is basically everywhere. There's a lot more to say about education, but I'm just going to move on here. We had a session on objectivity and creativity. And there we invited Don Houtman, he's a professional creative thinker. That is, he was paid for doing creative thinking, and he had a lot of interesting, positive suggestions on that area. If you want to review those, go back and look at our episode on objectivity and creativity. I'm not going to try to recount what he said. I'm just going to recount what I said, which I can remember better. And that is that there is a deep connection between objectivity and creativity. They both involve what I'm going to call creatical. That's a word, made up word, creatical refocusing. I made up this word, but turns out I wasn't the first one to make up the word, but the other guys did. And anyway, he didn't use it in the same way. So I'm going to stick with it. Creatical refers to the underlying commonality between creative and critical thinking processes. And the underlying commonality is that they both involve challenging, to do well at both creative and critical thinking, involve challenging your own implicit premises or assumptions, or what Ayn Rand called premises. Check your premises is the idea, I guess, that you challenge your premises because if you have bad assumptions, bad premises can make bad critical thinking. If you have bad premises and your assumptions are bad, you will not be able to do the right critical analysis where those assumptions are involved. So they make bad critical thinking. And bad assumptions break, destroy, inhibit good creative thinking, because they lock you in the so-called box. You know, you need to get out of, how do you get out of the box? Challenge the assumptions that lock you in the box. So the bad assumptions make bad critical thinking and break good creative thinking. And it's the same process involved, which is a basic process that you need to be able to do to be objective. You need to be able to challenge your own bad assumptions in order to be objective. So that was my thought there. Let's talk. We're doing all right. I guess we could talk some. We got some more to still talk about. That's some perception things. Some other perception things. You know, the idea of that we are not, that we promoted in one of our more popular episodes. We promote the idea that we're not in the matrix. You know, you go around these days, people are saying that we're in the matrix more and more. There's more and more of that sort of stuff. And I think for myself, the best cure for that is to study James J. Gibson's work in perception. And again, I recommend for anybody to get hold of his second book, particularly is good for objectivists, The Senses Considered as Perceptual Systems. Because what he does there is he says, you can think of the senses in two different senses. There's the senses considered as perceptual systems, as a way of achieving direct contact with reality, a knowledge of reality, and as opposed to the senses considered as channels of sensation, where you get representations or misrepresentations, and you don't get direct knowledge of the world, and you don't want to confuse those two senses. And unfortunately, objectivism holds too much to the senses considered as channels of sensation view, and should move over to Gibson's view. There's no percept in Gibson's view. There's no percept that is integrated from sensations. That would be a construction, and it would be a thing that would kind of be between you and reality, and you're aware of this percept. Rather, in Gibson's view, perception is detection, not construction of something. And if you hold the Gibsonian view, you have no problem at all with Immanuel Kant. You can just dismiss Immanuel Kant, who Gibson identified explicitly as his enemy, or to me, he said that. And you don't have this problem that supposedly comes up of, well, it does come up. It comes up if you have a certain theory of perception, but you don't have the problem of the interference of the mind's own structure, or the imposition of the mind's own structure on the input of sense. That comes up in the sensation-based theories, that you take in sensation and they are somehow massaged or supplemented, or somehow something added to them, or they're put together in some particular way that your mind does. In Gibson's view, it's detection. It's like what a radio does in picking up a radio signal, or a Geiger counter picking up the radiation. It doesn't construct anything, any object of awareness other than the thing itself. You just detect the thing itself. So the whole problem of the Kantian system does not arise in Gibson, and you don't need to talk about, for example, you don't need to have a long song and dance about form of perception. You know, form of perception, which objectivism sometimes talks about, is the sensory qualities that go along with perception. Gibson would say they accompany perception. They're not the basis of perception. they're basically irrelevant to perception in the Gibson sense. So you don't need, for example, what's an example that we can talk about? It's hard to talk about these phenomena, by the way, but someone might say that we perceive the railroad tracks going off into the distance in the form of intersecting lines in something in our awareness, in some sensory quality in our awareness. And if you do that, then you have to figure out how the brain or the mind or somebody figures out that the intersecting lines really don't intersect and they really parallel. So, you have that problem. In the Gibson theory, the sensory quality that you have there, that experience of the intersection or the experience of the bent stick, that experience, those are phenomena of sensory qualities, and they're not where the information is. The information is in the structure of the light picked up over your eye over time. And if you want details, we did discuss some of them in some of our episodes, but I really recommend Gibson's books. He's a very good writer for more details on this. So the whole thing, you don't need it. You don't need to talk about. It's not. In fact, let me put it this way: what are called forms of perception are really not forms of perception. They are sensory qualities that you experience. They're real. The things that are called forms of perception, sensory qualities are real. That's a subtitle from Opar. That's true, but they're not the basis of perception. So you don't have to have a whole explanation of why perception is not distorted by the machinery that causes perception. In Gibson's view, that machinery is detection machinery. It doesn't put any of its own nature. It doesn't do that. Detection machines don't do that. They just detect.
You don't need form of perception, nor do you need inerrancy. It's valid. It's directly given to you. You co-perceive it, as Gibson would say.
Well, yeah, Gibson says you co-perceive the self. To perceive the world
in the environment.
Yeah. Yes. I just had a thought that just escaped there before I volitionally grabbed it.
Optimal slowness. Yeah.
You know how these thoughts they're in your periphery and you try to grab it and can't. Some of them you grab and some of them you can't quite grab onto. Form of perception. Yes. They're not forms of perception. They're forms of you got to make this distinction between the kinds of senses. The senses considered as perceptual systems versus channels of sensation. The formal phenomena are in the channels of sensation, and they do exist, but they're not a problem if you don't have them in your perception theory. There's something else I wanted to say about that. Oh, illusions. I did try to say in one of our sessions, and this is not very much the edge of knowledge for me. I was trying to give an explanation of some illusions, at least, as confusing sensory qualities for perception. So if you happen to see, close your eye, the Ames room is an excellent example. I'll just say that. I think I won't go through the example again of something where a momentary sensory impression. These sensory qualities are usually momentary things. Perception is the pickup of information over time, and sometimes these momentary sensory impressions kind of overpower the perception, and you get some illusions are explained that way. They're not perceptual phenomena. Many illusions are not at all perceptual phenomena. They're sensory phenomena, which is a different thing altogether.
They're sensory qualia that are accompanied by the direct perception.
How about we say it the other way? The direct perception is accompanied by the sense, because the less important thing, the sensory quality, are the less important things. They're accompanied, but they're not part of the perception itself. They're not the basis of the perception.
Well, they are and they aren't.
They are and they aren't. That's a Bob phrase right there. They are. They are. Okay, Bob, go ahead. Sure.
Well, all of us guys from Arkansas know the difference. We have to know the difference between what is.
Yeah, got to know that.
No, what I mean is that the energy of the environment comes in through various mechanisms, and what comes out is a perception, an object, an awareness of an object in reality.
Yes.
And this is where I like to defend Ayn Rand's words like integration. And she does not mean, or if she did, I'm pretty sure she does not, because she had indeed seen Efron's article about this. She did not mean that you take these sensations and the brain somehow mixes them together. She means that your body, your brain, your perceptual apparatus does what Gibson says it does. And in her terms, it's an integration of all the information that's out there. In Gibson's term, it's a detection of the information that's out there. But the sense in which, where did we get off on this?
There was a point here. Well, I was talking about the illusions being momentary sensory qualities, and then overpower perception. As some, I'm not saying that explains all illusions, but some. Now,
this is not a point about illusions. This is really a point about the term integration. And you can take integration to be these senses come into individually and they get mashed together, they get integrated. They weren't, they were apart, now they're put together, they're integrated. And that's not what I believe the term was used for by Ayn Rand. I believe she means it in the sense that there are all the energy information out there in the world reacts on you, your body, your mind, and the result is a perception of reality.
Yeah, but Gibson definitely denied that it was integration.
I know, and I think
it was well, it depends on how you use it. It's true. It depends on how you use it. I mean, the point he made was that what you do from the energy is you extract the invariance. You extract what is invariant out of the variance. And that's not the same process as integration, I guess he would say. And also, the other point is that the world does not require integration. The world is already what it is. It's put together already. You don't have to put together what God has not put asunder. It's already there. You just have to detect what's there. That's the task of perception. Now, I don't think Ayn Rand would actually disagree with that, but I actually think that had she met Gibson, which unfortunately I did not arrange, I was just a little grad student, in the back in the days before there was internet or stuff, and we were hundreds of miles away. So anyway, it's not my fault exactly, but anyway, they didn't meet. If they had met, I have a suspicion that she would have adopted his theory of perception and made the necessary modifications to the objectivist view. That's what I think, but who knows? Unfortunately, we'll never know for sure about that. That's the opportunity was lost there.
Well, objectivism does not really have a theory of perception.
It's not part of the philosophy, fortunately. It does. There is a.
It takes the perceptual as the given.
Yes, which is good. There is an account in terms of sensation, which I don't think is even coherent because it doesn't say how anything. There's some kind of process in the brain. How does that work? Nothing. There's nothing about that. Secondly, how would the brain, a physical entity, made of matter, how would that exactly take sensations, which are irreducible conscious phenomena? How does that work? How would that even in principle work? No answer, because it doesn't make any sense. I just throw that out. But it's true that fortunately, that theory, or whatever you want to call it, it's not a theory. That description is not. Ayn Rand said it's, as you know, Bob, in ITOE, she says the discovery of sensations as the components, I don't know what word she used, of perception is a quote scientific discovery. And the only thing I disagree with there is that it's not a scientific discovery because it's not true. but it's true that it's not philosophy. So we don't have to deal with the issue of, are we, if you don't hold that perception is the integration of sensation, are you thereby attacking the objectivist philosophy? No, that is not the case. And unfortunately, I think we have to pretty much stop there.
Yeah.
I didn't get to left versus right in politics, or the inalienability of rights, which is two of Bob's things. That's more political stuff. So, and we've got other things. So, Steve, we're going to have to do another one, don't you think?
Yeah, I anticipated that for sure. And so let's get our super chat in here from Bonnie Bertrand for
sorry,
$5.
Bonnie, yeah.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Hi, Bonnie. Yeah.
She says, for Lee, why do you see free will and introspective awareness? Why do you see free will and introspective awareness interchangeably?
Oh,
Introspection is a volitional act, but isn't volition itself more basic?
Yeah, I don't think, I hope I didn't say, I thought you were going to say something different. I thought you were going to say what I agree with. And then all of a sudden the concept of interchangeability came up. I hope I didn't say they were interchangeable. Introspection, let's see. Let me see if I can sharpen that up before we leave in a brief way, very brief, because it's a good question. It's a good point. They're not interchangeable because they're not the same thing. Introspection is an exertion of free will, because introspection in the what I call thought process introspection in its most basic form is basically, I'm hedging a little bit here, it's a form of thinking. It's conceptual identification, or it's a form of abstraction from your conscious experiences is, as Alan Godhealth put it, me being aware of something. That's what all conscious experience is. So there is no, the Humean problem of the self is an illusion. That problem is an illusion, not the self, but the problem. It says me being aware of something, and you can abstract out the me part, and that's a thought process, a conceptual thought process, and that's introspection. And it is a form of it's volitional effort involved, but it's not the same thing, because as I said, volitional effort applies to, just for example, direction of perceptual attention, and that doesn't involve, as I understand it anyway, does not involve introspection. When you exert information, volition on the conceptual level, you need introspective awareness to help direct that attention to the proper object. But it's not the same thing. They're not interchangeable. Introspection is a component of a whole process. So it's part of that second part. As I say, free will is exerting effort on a particular object. And the part of deciding what the particular object is in a conceptual process, that involves introspection. Introspection enables us to do that. So I hope that maybe clarifies. I'm not saying they're interchangeable, but they're closely interrelated. I guides V, introspection guides volition, when we're talking about the whole at the conceptual level. How about that? Best I can do on sitting on my horse right now.
So we've gone over and refocused on some key concept issues that we've dealt with here, and we've sharpened our skill, the skill of will, and that is the skill of will. Yes, that's Lee's new, or I don't know how new it is, but he told me recently, and I think that's what it is. It's not that we initiate. The skill is not about initiation, but it's about directing our volition toward the refocusing of these key issues. So thanks, guys, and we'll be off for a couple
Shall we go to Clubhouse?
Yes, let's go to Clubhouse. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.